Well, since it is a little after 4, I'm going to ask people to introduce themselves. We have, well, we have quite a few alumni here, but the featured speakers today, along with Judi Garcia from the Career Center, are Ellie Vengala, Galou, and Sabrina Lim. Judi, would you mind, like, should we just start with people saying like where they work now? And
Yep, we can get started.
Great. Well, everyone here is a very recent graduate, and they're all basically on at least one of their first jobs straight out of school.
This is great.
Bree, do you want to start and say where you work now and how long?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Sabrina Lim. I recently graduated from San Jose State in this past December, so very recent. And I am currently working at Workday as a technical writer.
Great.
Awesome. Great.
Alex?
Okay.
Sure. Hi, thanks for having me. I'm Alex. I graduated December of 2019, so a few months before the pandemic, and I just started a job with Chronicle Books in San Francisco as an editorial fellow.
Ellie?
Congratulations. Thank you for being here. Yeah.
I'm Ellie. I graduated last May, and I'm currently a communications specialist at Ubisoft.
Ubisoft?
Yes.
All right. All right. All right. So I guess what I'll do is I'll just get started with the questions, and Noella, if that's okay. All right. All right. So so my first question to the three of you is, what made you decide to major in English in the first place? So whoever feels like starting, feel free.
Sure, I'll start. I wanted to work in publishing from a young age, I think in high school. But my dad wasn't fond of the idea of me being an English major. So I applied to schools as a business major. I got accepted, and then I changed my major behind his back. And I graduated, and he had to be okay with it, basically. But I really wanted to do it because I am a huge reader, and I think that's probably a blanket statement for everybody in this room, but I really was interested to know the mechanics of publishing and the life cycle of a book. So that was my driving force to be an English major.
That's great. All right.
Yeah, I had really similar motivations. I have loved to read and write for pretty much as long as I can remember. But it took me a while to realize that English was something that I wanted to pursue. It wasn't even an option that I considered until about halfway through my time in community college. So I bounced around a couple of different things. I went from psychology to nursing to journalism. I tried a lot of it. But yeah, I pretty much just came to terms with how much I really enjoyed writing. I always excelled in my English classes, so I figured it was something that I should pursue. And then once I came to San Jose State, that's where I started learning more about technical writing. And it's where I officially declared my technical writing major.
Yeah, mine's kind of similar to Bree's because I attended Advanced Spartan Day when I was a high school senior, and the English department had this little booth. I remember it was Mark Thompson there, and he was telling us about technical writing. And I was like, oh, this sounds right up my alley, because I thought about English, but I didn't want to be a teacher. I didn't want to be a writer, like a fiction author, I mean. So, but what he was describing to me was sounded exactly like what I wanted to do, which was to be a writer for a company, where he's like, every company needs a writer. And he's like, that sounds up my alley. So then I chose that for my major. And yeah, so now I think I would go under a professional writer. Yeah.
Great. All right. So my next question to you is, can you share with us some highlights from your time as a student at SJSU? So whoever wants to start.
I guess we can just keep this order. I'll go.
Sure.
I had such a good time at San Jose State, and I think the highlights were being involved in the different organizations that are connected with the department, because that's where I really found my interest. It's not just like reading Homer, which is great too, but it was interesting to learn about the contemporary world of literature, which is offered extensively through programs at San Jose State. And I found a home there, and all of my interests just kind of sparked from being involved in those organizations, and I'm still very connected with them. And I've made really good friends from being involved with them. So I have to say, being involved with Read Magazine and the Center for Literary Arts, and among others.
Great. All right.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely being involved in all the kind of extracurricular things that I was able to do was for sure the highlight of my time at SJSU. Not only was it a great way to kind of connect with my peers and some of the professors, but it was great experience that I was able to put on my resume as well. And it kind of formed the basis of a lot of the talking points that interviewers discussed with me when I kind of sat for interviews. So yeah, being involved in like Read Magazine with the English department, the campus newspaper, all of those formed really the basis of what I discussed on my resume.
Following the Read Magazine train, that was also my favorite experience as a student, because it was the first thing where, like, when it was published and I saw my name on the cover, it made me feel really proud. And I was like, that's what I want to do for the rest of my life, like be on the sidelines of things, not like front there. So that was a definite highlight. And that also inspired me to get a minor in PR, which is what I'm working in right now. So definitely Read Magazine is a highlight for me.
Great. All right. My next question is, what should English students be doing now to help them stand out for internships and jobs?
I think I realized this later after I graduated, but I think it's really great advice because it helped me a lot. I discovered the power of informational interviews recently, and I would go onto LinkedIn, and any company that I was interested in, I would essentially bombard the employees there in a very polite way, and ask them to just meet with me for 15 minutes for coffee, especially if you're interested in the publishing industry, which is famously impacted and really difficult to enter. It's really effective to kind of force your way into people's lives and network that way. And I did that during the pandemic, so a lot of it was virtual anyway, but I would say connect with as many people as you can, even if they're not directly in a position that you'd like to be, but they will advocate for you and they will help you. They will look over your resume. They will connect you with their supervisors. And I would suggest, if you're in the middle of looking for internships or jobs, to scour the company and find people who will advocate for you.
Yeah, I agree. I spoke with several technical writers when I was still a student, and from them I was able to kind of gauge what it would be like to be a technical writer. And at the time, a lot of what they were saying didn't really make sense to me because there was a lot of jargon involved in the discussion. But now that I am actually someone who is working as a technical writer, it makes so much sense. So it provided a good amount of kind of background information that I was able to rely on now that I am working. But on top of that, I would also say to jump at whatever way to get involved that you can. Kind of what I was saying in my previous answer. A lot of the experiences, even though they weren't really technical writing internships and jobs, a lot of that is what people wanted to hear about, because they know, like, as new graduates, they know that we're not experts yet, but all they care about is that you have the training and you kind of have what it takes to be able to learn how.
Kind of going on the same lines, I was an intern in my company for 11 months and they just brought me on full time. So I've been interviewing new interns with my other coworkers. So I feel like I really have like the behind the scenes look into why they chose me. And my manager told me the thing that stood out on my resume was that I had a portfolio. And it wasn't just like essays or things you publish, but things that I did on my own that showed that I was passionate and willing to go the extra effort, that I was willing to, pursue what interested me, which was video games. And when she was working for a gaming company, she wants to see that, right? if you're interested and you're passionate about a subject, go ahead and like pursue it in any way. It doesn't have to be books or games, but whatever you're interested in. The intern before me was interested in wrestling, and he made wrestling videos, and that was still like a cool thing. Like he didn't have to do that. It's just something that interested him, and that showed her that he was willing to go the extra effort. So just definitely doing that. It doesn't always have to be like school extracurriculars, but just passions do count.
All right, great advice, great advice. Okay, so my next question for the three of you is, and you've already touched on this, please talk about the importance of active networking and your suggestions for ways for students to network at SJSU.
I touched on that a little with LinkedIn, but at SJSU, I guess I would say be a really good student and treat your professors like have a lot of respect for them, but approach them like you would a friend. And I've had so much help from professors of every denomination, and you just have to not be threatened by professors, and almost in a way think of them as your much more knowledgeable equals, because they can help you network and connect, and their span is very wide. So I would say work really hard and prove to your teachers that you are a good student, which I'm sure everybody here is because you're at a career fair. But that's important, and they will advocate for you. So I think advocating is kind of the key word.
Yeah, I think when we talk about networking, a lot of times the emphasis is placed on networking with professionals who are already in the field. But I think it's just as important to network with your peers, as in like your classmates, because those are the people who are going to be in the same field as you. And I've heard so many cases of, you know, people who were classmates in college advocating for their old classmates and trying to bring them into their current job, or maybe on the flip side, telling their bosses that a certain person isn't the best person to bring in and to hire. But yeah, I think forming genuine connections with your classmates and working hard in the class in group projects so that you can kind of show to them, to the people that you will be in the field with, that you are a hard worker and you have what it takes to be, you know, working alongside them.
Yeah, something I think hasn't been covered is figure out the industry you want to go in. For me, I figured I was PR. So then I reached out to the PR department at SJSU and made connections there, because they are people who have been in the industry and they know how it works. So definitely figure the industry out first, because there's so many departments on campus and so many people that you may never come across because you don't take those classes, but you can still connect with those professors and you can still make those connections if you're really passionate about, I don't know, law. You know, it's up to you.
Okay, so my next question is, I want to talk about the pandemic a little bit. So I'd like to know from you, how has the pandemic affected your work, and how are you adjusting to change these days as far as your work and life?
I think we could probably all talk about this for hours. I was lucky enough to not be a student right before the pandemic started, but I was basically for the entire year of the pandemic job searching and interning for free, which got difficult at times, but I stayed strong. But I'd say, so I was actually accepted into the Columbia Publishing course right the day that the pandemic lockdown hit. And I was supposed to do that the summer of 2020, and that didn't work out clearly. And the program was very expensive anyway, and it just didn't end up meshing with what I wanted to do. So I found other ways of educating myself about the industry essentially. And like I said earlier, did a lot of virtual interviews and just spent, I treated applying to jobs like a job of itself, because I had to write individual cover letters to every single place. And I would say that's a way that it affected me. The pandemic affected me. I had to do interview processes from home and things of that nature. So I feel for you who are all still in school, but I think that because of that, you'll actually have an advantage because you understand the virtual world a little bit more than I did when I was dropped off into the water after graduation. So use that as a leg up is my advice to you, because I think that you are all superheroes if you can do college classes on the internet.
Yeah, so I was a student for all of 2020, so I've kind of been in this whole virtual thing for a while now, and this is basically just normal to me now. So in that sense, things aren't too drastically different now that I am, virtually working. But I think the real challenge is going to come when I shift from like virtual working to in-person working, because it's just a different environment. But I think the biggest way that it has affected my work is I'm not really able to connect with my coworkers in a way that I might be able to in the office. I'm not able to get the help that I would normally be able to. So a lot of it has been self-learning right now. I'm fairly new to the job, so yeah, it's really relying on my own research skills, I think.
I definitely echo that. I started my internship and finished it in this exact place that I'm sitting here right now. So it doesn't feel like anything's changed except I get a salary now. It's weird. It's definitely more of a, I would say, barrier to connect with your coworkers because it feels so official to like set up a meeting on a calendar, and you can't just ask them this question you might ask when you're in the office together. But so I really recommend that don't think of it as that scary. Like it took me 6 months to just be like, can I call you for like 5 minutes to have a quick question that I can't type out, but I want to figure out how to do this. So that's definitely something to get through. And I also think that when I was doing a lot of these interviews for the next intern coming in, we had a lot of students right now talking about how like everything changed. So I just stopped going to my club, or I gave up all my projects. And that was kind of a bummer to listen to as a interviewee, but also I could tell like my manager was like, you didn't do anything else. Like you just dropped and you were like, oh, I'm just gonna sit at home. Like it's not like, it doesn't really show work ethic. And she told me afterwards, she's like, you can teach them any activities to do, any duties, but you can't teach them a work ethic. And if they're just gonna like give up because something changed, that's not very helpful to us either, because we are doing things remotely. We've all had to pivot. So if you can find new opportunities for yourself, like a new intern we're bringing on, like she made a whole Instagram for herself because she couldn't go outside and protest like all the atrocities that was happening last year. And that was really interesting for me to hear that she was finding an outlet for her creativity and finding some way to be creative even in an online space. So things like that, even if you can't go to club meetings or anything like that, find other ways. It's totally possible. It doesn't have to be a big deal. That's a small Instagram account, right? But it still shows that she's going the extra effort. So pivoting in a pandemic doesn't always have to be like, I give up on everything.
All right. Again, just excellent advice. Okay, so my next question is to all of you. Can you talk about any challenges you have had to overcome during your education and or career so far that you would like to share with the audience?
I'd say mine is very industry specific. I think publishing is famously doing a lot of work to undo some horrible things about itself, and learning about how, really experiencing when I was applying to jobs at Penguin Random House and Simon & Schuster and Macmillan and areas like that, the Big Five, learning how truly corporate it is was a little bit heartbreaking. And so that was a big challenge because I would apply to probably a job to 5 a week from one of those publishers. And unless you know somebody, it was virtually impossible to get any sort of contact, which is why I started doing those informational interviews. But I ended up at the publisher of my dreams because they're independent and they're California based. And so that's how I kind of overcame the trouble. But I guess it would be I guess realizing that my dream of being a publisher and working in editorial was not going to be as easy as I always thought it would. It was a big heartbreak, but yeah, so just, I would say stay really motivated if you're interested in publishing. And I can't tell you, I had a whole Trello board of my rejections. I probably got 75 to 120 rejections over the last year. It was really, really tough. But once I finally got a job, it was, I popped a bottle of champagne, if that tells you anything. So.
So mine is kind of specific to the pandemic. The past year, or in 2020 as a whole, was, I think, the busiest year that I've had as a student. I was doing a lot of extracurriculars, internships, clubs, things like that. And it was really difficult to learn how to prioritize everything and still give everything the attention and care, I guess, that each project deserved, because I wanted to put a genuine effort into whatever I was working on. But eventually I did kind of find my way and figure out how to do that. And interestingly, that's kind of a lot of what people who are hiring me or interviewing me wanted to hear about, especially as a technical writer, because a lot of technical writers work in agile environments. They're working in 2-week sprints, so things are changing constantly. And so they wanted to know how I fared in that kind of environment. And I'm not sure what years everyone here is in, but another challenge that I faced was when I had first come into SJSU, it was just such a drastic change to go from a community college and then to now this 4-year university. It took a lot of adjusting, and I think at that point I was only taking 3 classes, and then by the end I was taking 5 or 6. So it takes a while to kind of get into the kind of rhythm of things, I guess. So be gentle with yourself as you're kind of learning how it goes.
Yeah, I definitely echo what Bree and Alex both said. For me, I think the biggest challenge was I didn't know which industry I wanted to go in until like my last year. And that was kind of difficult for me because I had like 2 different resumes that were, one was technical writing and one was professional writing. And it's kind of hard because you're not having a clear goal in mind. So it makes, even when you're applying to jobs, more muddled, and you don't really have a set idea of who you're presenting yourself as an interview candidate. Like you have different skills and strengths in both maybe, but I think definitely if you figure out one field to go into, it's better, because then you can speak to it more. You can build up those skills rather than like being spread over both sides. That's definitely something I got over. It doesn't have to be like a very specific industry, but just the area you want to work in would be really helpful. Professional wise, I started in the pandemic, so I've never met any of my coworkers, but they all know each other. So that was kind of intimidating because I was like, oh, I don't know any of these people, and they all knew each other. They all knew how the processes work. So I think it took a little bit longer for me to get used to everything and not feel as scared to speak up in meetings. So they wanted to hear what I said, but it was just, they didn't know me much yet. And even I remember one of them sent a picture and I was like, oh, they all have legs, which was really obvious, but just like I've always just seen them from the head up. So things like that you get used to when you're working remotely, that I didn't really realize would be a big deal, but it is. Yeah, it's definitely more of a barrier to get to know other people.
All right, so you've shared so much great information with everybody. So I'm on my final question, which is, what key advice would you like to share with our students? You've given a lot of great advice this afternoon, but as we wrap up, before we get into Q&A, I'd really like to hear what you really feel would be important for students to know.
I feel like my advice is maybe really on the nose or really obvious, but I think the best advice I have is to do really well in school and just care about what you're learning and do all of your reading. Like, I'm serious. I think that helped me more than anything. And I know that's not directly related to technical writing or teaching, or it might not seem like it's professionally applicable, but it's really important. And I think reading what I read in school was the most helpful thing and the best experience. So I would urge you to just be really hungry about school, because there are things I think about when I was in college that I'm like, man, I shouldn't have gotten a B in that class, and I just needed to do one thing differently, or just go to office hours one extra time. And of course, I mean, employers don't really look at your grades. That's not really what they're looking for, but it will benefit you immensely to just really thoroughly be ravenous to do well and speak up, even if you're shy in class. It will stay with you forever.
Yeah, on that note, I think it's also really important to not forget about your literature classes and those classes where you're doing research projects, because one thing that I've kind of realized in relation to technical writing in particular is that it's not just enough to be a good writer, you also need to know how to be a good researcher, because 60% of the job is research. You're not doing as much writing in comparison to how much you need to be going through old documents, learning the product. And so those kinds of assignments in school really do form a great foundation for a job like technical writing. Also, I would advise to apply to jobs a few months before you actually graduate. That's something that I learned the hard way. I think I started applying to jobs 1 or 2 months before I graduated, and I wish I had started sooner than that. And it sounds extreme, but especially now in the job market that we have with the pandemic, everything is just kind of, it's messy and everything takes so long. I still receive rejection letters to this day. So it takes a while. And if you're worried about not having enough to put on your resume as someone who has not graduated yet, there's ways that you can market your school projects on your resume and kind of highlight the work that you've done in your classes in a way that would be interesting and relevant to hiring managers.
Definitely agree with you. That was what I was going to say, is have a lot of people look at your resume. I remember when I was in college, I think I had multiple counselors at the Success Center look at my, like Sandy here looked at it, I think, and Richard. And it's just because a lot of people are going to be looking at your resume. So it's, what did they get from it? And how can they get across what you're trying to sell yourself up? Because you kind of are trying to sell yourself as a good candidate for the job. So making sure that you have that resume that's been just reviewed by a lot of people. You don't have to take all of their advice, but just get their feedback. And like what Bree was saying, the projects are a big deal, because whatever you're doing in work is just more projects. So it's just about how you phrase the work you do. Even if it is just schoolwork, it goes a long way for the job you're trying to apply for. And yeah, have a lot of people look at your resume and be open to internships. I think that would be a second advice. Is it might not seem like a full-time job, and that's kind of scary, but like I got hired full-time, there's always that opportunity, and it's at the end of the day, it's great professional experience. And I think there are more internship opportunities available now in the pandemic. And you know what, if you're going to be virtual anyway, it's okay, just do part-time, even if it's lower pay, get that experience and go from there. Yeah.
All right, so with that, I would like to now open it up to questions. And I don't know if we have any questions yet. So you can put your questions in the chat, or with the small group that we have, you are also welcome to unmute yourself and ask your question if you'd like. So any thoughts, any questions for the panel?
Thank you, Ellie, for putting your contact in.
Yeah.
That's in the chat. That's really nice.
as much as I hate LinkedIn, it's really useful.
It's very useful. You're preaching to the choir in the Career Center, that's for sure.
Well, while people are formulating their questions, I just wanted to make a comment because, well, I have to admit, like, I did end up asking like very high achievers from school, like that's the people I know the best. But so it's a little bit loaded. But I was surprised, Alex, when you said like, you know, like doing your reading and being good in school and like, because I always feel like as a faculty member, when people ask me for letters of rec or they ask me for, or sometimes employers will ask me, you know, do you have someone to recommend or so on. So, and generally, the folks that I know the best are the ones that are most engaged, the folks that are, you know, usually doing well, the folks that show up in my office hours, that kind of thing. And I always feel bad because, you know, does that mean I'm always kind of biased more towards the folks that are very academic? Because that's generally how I'm evaluating people. So, you know, the folks that stand out in my mind generally. But I think you're right, like both Alex and Ellie, you mentioned the work ethic. And it made me think about, I heard a speech by Lonnie Guinier, who was a Harvard law professor that was, she was at one time considered for the Supreme Court. And she gave a talk once about how, you know, the LSAT isn't actually a very good measure of how well people do in law school. And she said, actually, the best measure of how well people do in law school, if they come from a working class background, because they have a stronger work ethic, they had to really work at it to get to where they are today. And I thought that was a really interesting comment. And it actually describes a lot of our students at San Jose State. You know, that a lot of folks are first gen, a lot of folks have gone through a lot, or you know, a lot of them are paying for their own school. And just, you know, being hungry, working really hard, whether that's, you know, working a job for money or in the classroom, like, and also all the extracurriculars you mentioned, just seems like, you know, being extra in some ways is what you need to do to get the jobs you really want.
Right. Yeah, I think for me at least, my drive and hunger from school came from my dad being an immigrant, and there was no room for failure, kind of, and he always told me growing up, be hungry, you're not hungry enough, you're not hungry enough, which I think I took really seriously when it came to my schoolwork. And if I was going to be an English major, I was going to read everything. Like I wanted to be thorough. And I don't think that, you know, having read anything necessarily gave me a leg up professionally. But I in a way though, it earned the respect of my professors, and having the respect of my professors got me great letters of rec, and it was a phenomenal jumping off point. So I think that you're right. It really is about your work ethic and sacrificing a little bit to stay up longer and read. And luckily, I think we all enjoy reading, so it didn't really feel like too much of a chore, but it was hard at times. Yeah.
So we have a question in the chat. I'd like to ask the group, as an English major who is focusing in creative writing, how would I go about searching for specific jobs?
My first advice would be talk to faculty members. And this is what I was saying earlier, that you don't always know the amount of like resources you have from these professors who know their industries from like the back of their hand. Like Professor Mark Thompson will probably tell you more about creative writing in a different way that you might not expect, which should be copywriting. You're still creative writing, but it's not as, I guess it's not as interesting, but it's a profession that's needed in a lot of companies. And it's the people who write all the back of products, all the copy, everything you might imagine. That still requires a lot of creative energy. That's still something a lot of people are hiring for, and that might still engage your mind creatively. So definitely check out the resources, check with your professors. But I think copywriting would be a great field for you if you want to look into that.
Any other thoughts?
Oh, I was gonna piggyback off of Ellie. That was really great advice. I think copywriting is a lot more creative than people realize. I've been doing a lot of it in my job now, and I didn't really know how fun it could be. So that would be a really great place for you to check out. And if you're really interested in the literary field, I would suggest to not limit yourself to strictly writing, but maybe check out what's it like to be a literary agent, or what's it like to work in marketing at a publisher, or maybe think about one day owning your own independent press or something like that, because that is also equally as creative, and you're very connected to the literary community. You're reading all the time, and you can write as well if you want to, but those are my suggestions, I'd say.
One thing that my friends in creative writing always tell me about, that you have to, you have to be prepared to receive a lot of rejections, for every story or poem that gets published. There's lots of, rejections. And it was interesting what you guys were saying about, looking for jobs. It seems like it's the same advice, you've got to, it's the same advice I would give to people applying to graduate schools too. Like, expect a lot of rejections, but that doesn't mean you don't keep asking and keep applying. I remember a friend of mine in grad school, nowadays rejections are probably just emails, but they used to send them on nice paper. And she actually saved up all her rejection letters and made homemade paper out of it, pulped it, and made it.
That's funny. I would also, that made me think of another great suggestion, which would be to get an editorial internship at an independent or small publisher. I did one at McSweeney's in San Francisco, which was the best year of my life. It was so much fun. But my biggest task was reading through the slush pile. So I developed a huge, my tastes really developed because I was reading so many different types of things, and I was learning, what's up to their standard and what's not. So if you have a chance to read through a slush pile and you're a creative writer, I think that's really important for your writing.
All right, well, so we still have time for questions or any thoughts. So for all of you here, here's your chance. Hi, Alec.
Hey. Yeah, it should be a fun question. What's a course or courses you took at San Jose State, whether it was an English course, that you feel has influenced your work, or it's still helping you in your career, and has been memorable after you graduated?
I think it's sorry, Bree, I didn't want to cut you
No,
off.
go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, I think it's English 107. I forget all the course numbers now. It's technical writing, and it's the fun where Mark Thompson makes you make a portfolio, like he's like make it. So, and that was the one that's memorable to me because I still have that portfolio, and everything you do in that class are just projects to put on your portfolio. And that was a really interesting way to, I feel like, to run a class, because it made me realize, like, oh, you know what, professional life is just going to be these projects too. So this is going to be a portfolio that I'm going to keep adding on to later on in my life. But I was kind of forced to it, but it's for the best. So that was a great class.
Yeah, I was going to say 107 too. That is the technical writing class. And I think like 90% of my portfolio is just assignments from that class. And it's great because Mark Thompson really tailors that class to the kinds of things that you're going to experience as a technical writer. So it's great background. But I think also a great class was, I forget what it's called, but there was a class where I had the opportunity to be a managing editor for one of the academic journals on campus, one of the justice studies academic journals. And while I was a justice studies minor, not a major, so I wasn't as well versed in that field, but I was able to use a lot of my strengths as an English major to really deliver in that class. And so I think it's important to kind of look for opportunities like that around campus, because you'll find things in other departments, not just the English department. There are lots of ways that you can get involved and kind of really add to your experience.
Going off from that, people are so surprised that my writing is so so much better than the other work that they produce. Like even actual like working professionals, sorry. Like in my company, it's because I'm an English major and they like come back to me like, oh, Ellie, read through this. It's like, it will always come in handy that you're English major, like use that as leverage. It's no matter what field you're working in, everyone's always going to be writing something. So you're like, oh, I can help draft this. And it gives you more visibility and also, uses you to flex that writing muscle. A lot of people apparently don't know how to write in the professional fields.
That's what I hear.
Yeah.
You would be surprised, like even at at the university, I'm on committees mostly with PhDs. And they're always like, can you write this for us? So it's it's kind of a pain, because they also think that, like our degrees are in grammar and not necessarily in, the various, areas that we've chosen. But it is true though, that if people lean on you to do the writing, one, you might get, you need to be careful that you're not exploited doing more of their work. But on the other hand, you get to shape the message. So like in committees, when they want me to help with the policy, well, guess who gets to write it? You know what I mean? So it does give you more power when you if you want it.
Yeah, interestingly, I don't know if this seems reductive, or I was surprised at my own answer to this question. And I think 100W was one of the most valuable classes I ever took at San Jose State. And I was really shocked at how little I knew. And I thought I knew a lot. So that was a really helpful class. I didn't take 107 because I wasn't in the tech writing concentration, which I think in retrospect I would have done because I've heard so many phenomenal things about the courses. But I'd say 100W was really great. And Read Magazine, which is a class too, if you have room in your schedule, just do it. It's so much fun. I would recommend it and you learn a lot.
All right, so I have another question. So this is the question: what can you recommend for someone who graduated a few years ago? And this individual has a bachelor's in journalism. In terms of finding ways to keep my resume relevant and network, maybe something you noticed specifically in the work setting.
I can go. This kind of goes back to what I was saying about finding your field. I think if you establish yourself as a name within the field you're going for, then that's how you stay relevant. You're keeping up with the industry. I'm just going to use the industry that I'm in right now, which is games. So you'd be freelance writing for games journalism. You're making yourself known. So when those opportunities do come up, people think of you. People are aware that you're looking for a position. So looking for freelance opportunities never hurts. But especially if you're doing it in a field you're interested in, that means you're going to end up where you want to be anyway. So definitely keep finding freelance opportunities if you can.
Going off that, I'd also add that this is a great area where I think internships would be really, really helpful. And nobody likes working for that low of pay or little pay at all, but it's a great way to fill up your resume with really relevant experience. And also, there are a lot of newfangled literary things that are coming up, like Bookstagram. I don't know if you're familiar. It's like the book Instagram, and it's this whole community of people who review books. Publishers send them books. There are people who just post these gorgeous pictures of books and talk about what books they like. There's niche categories in each. And when I found out about that, I was like, I gotta do that. So I started one. And a friend of mine who actually works at marketing at Penguin Random House now, she got her job by talking about her Bookstagram account. I mean, in the interview, she basically talked about how she runs a Bookstagram account for an hour and a half, and then she got a marketing job at Penguin Random House. So look in these kind of niche Twitter, Instagram areas, especially if you're interested in publishing, because that's where so much of the industry lives.
So I'm going to add something as well as a career counselor for H&A is something I really advise students all the time is definitely the importance of having a LinkedIn profile. And I know a lot of students have one, and some are still figuring it out. But for this question, you know, to me, what I do is I direct students, I show students how to get to the San Jose State University homepage on LinkedIn, and then look for alumni with your degree. Start there. So for this question, I would look up maybe journalism and look for alumni over the last maybe 3-4 years. And then you're going to see things like where they work, what role are they in, what position are they holding. And then as you start looking at profiles, you're going to find alumni who are working for companies you probably had never thought to apply to. Some of them may be freelancing, contract, all kinds of things, but LinkedIn is my go-to for all of this kind of thing. And when I share this information with students, it's really enlightening to them. They go, wow, I never even thought about all this. And at the same time, it's a good way to also figure out how to update your profile. If you haven't looked at it in a while, you need a new photo or new update your summary, things like that. So the other thing I advise students is look at some of these profiles really carefully and see how alumni are continuing to market themselves and update their profiles. And that will give you some really good ideas as well. Okay.
I have a question.
Sure.
For anyone who's able to answer, if you guys can kind of share maybe what the job searching process was like. Did you guys go in and apply for jobs knowing exactly what position you wanted, or did you need to kind of get your foot in the door and just apply for whatever was really available? And was it hard to kind of connect with employers? I know that everything is virtual, but Alex, I remember you saying that you spoke with employers and had meetings with them. Was it hard for them to kind of get in touch with you to be able to have those meetings happen?
Yeah, so I was actually mostly reaching out to lower totem pole employees, like editorial assistants rather than editors or executive editors. And one of whom I met through Bookstagram, so that was interesting. And I would meet with her for an informational interview or whoever it was, and she would find that usually they're very nice, especially if they're younger and newer to the field. So I would definitely try and avoid executives because they're very busy. And I would spend 15 to 30 minutes just asking, how did you get your foot in the door? And as for your question about, did I just apply to any job or was there something specific that I applied to? In publishing, I was told many different things by the people I had informational interviews with, and it was either apply to everything that you see every single time, or only apply to editorial, or only apply to marketing, or only apply to publicity, or only apply to managing editorial, because they aren't interested in people who are just desperate to get in, which is very ridiculous because it is really hard to get into. So of course you're going to get in where you can. So my final advice would be to apply to everything. And look up people who work for the company that maybe aren't so senior, because they'll be a lot more willing to meet with you, and they're also going to have way more of a relevant idea of what a resume should look like. And most people are just really nice and they'll offer to look at your resume and get back to you with notes. But if they're not, I would urge you to be a little pushy while still being polite and just ask them to look at your things. Yeah, so apply to everything and reach out to more elementary members.
Okay, thank you. That's good advice.
All right, so we only have a couple more minutes. Are there any other final questions before we wrap up? Anyone? Okay. All right.
Can I add I have a question. What was something that surprised you about your new job that you didn't expect?
I can go and say that it's the amount of people that are in the company, which might be like kind of like obvious, but I never realized there's so many different teams within a company, like brand, marketing, and HR, legal, and they're all separate, and they're all like, you know, they have all the departments, and it's very official, and it's kind of like overwhelming to see all those names from like your email list too. That was like that's a huge surprise for me. It's like just getting to know that there's, yeah, you're just one part of this giant company.
This might sound a little naive. It is going to sound naive because I was just talking about it with my friend, and they're like, "That's, well, you should expect that." But I was shocked at how hard the work is. Like, it's just really difficult, and I get corrections a lot, and I wasn't expecting, like, I guess it to be so difficult, which sounds so stupid, but it's just a lot harder than I thought it would be. But I'm learning. But that's one thing, because I thought, oh, the job search was so hard that I was like, once I get a job, everything is going to be fine. Like, it's going to be fine. And then it was just like, so yeah.
Okay, so we have I just want to have one more question before we, another question. What advice do you have for someone who is unsure about what to do with their English degree? So
I can speak on this because I was in this same boat. Basically, my entire time at community college and my first semester at SJSU, I knew that I wanted to end up in a career where I was writing. I knew that as long as I was writing, I would be happy. But I didn't really know exactly what that was going to look like. And it wasn't until I took a class called English 129, career writing with Professor West, who is one of the technical writing professors, that I learned about technical writing, because a lot of the technical writing concentration majors were in that class as well. So that's kind of where I first heard the term. And that's where my technical writing journey kind of started, I guess. So my advice would be to take classes in the major that interest you so that you can kind of dip your toe into all these different areas of English. I took a creative writing class, I took that career writing class, and all of them were great. And they were great ways for me to kind of sample what the writing styles in those different fields might be like. So I would definitely say take other classes outside of, or I guess more specific classes within the major, and also try and get internships. Just so, I mean, that sounds obvious, but internships are a great way to also sample a career as well.
I would suggest even more broad than that, like not even just English classes, but if there's any thing you ever thought about, like I've always been really interested in philosophy, so I took 2 philosophy classes my freshman year. To do those GEs, I try to be as experimental as possible. Like I took an astronomy class, a psychology class, just to see if any of them really spoke to me. And that even like exploring my options made me realize, oh, I want to do writing. This is too broad for me. It's too scientific for me. So even in that way, it was helpful. So definitely explore your interests. And like I was saying, every company needs a writer in some form. So every field needs you and your English expertise. So it's just that you find the field that speaks to you and then you pursue that.
And to add on to that, I'd also say don't be afraid of pursuing something because it's like a leisurely habit of yours, because that's how it was for me. I really liked literary fiction and reading, and I was too scared to make a career out of that. But if what you read is like fantasy, or if that's something that you're interested in, that's a possibility for you to work into. It doesn't just have to be a hobby.
That is all great advice. So on that note, it is about 5 o'clock. So
Thank you all.
Anybody has anything? Great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. This was just really insightful
Thanks
for
for
us too.
having us.
Yeah,
Tell your
thank you
friends.
for inviting.
I will get this, I will try to get this on the, our YouTube page, so your friends can see it too.
Cool. All right. All right, everyone. We'll have a good evening and weekend. And thank you again so much.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.